Why is beekeeping so hard? Well, it's not because your bees are weak, and it's not because you're careless as a beekeeper. It's hard because colony pressures compound and stack on top of one another. And by the time we recognize it, our interventions are no longer enough. You don't make one ill-timed treatment and see the consequences immediately afterwards. You make a series of small, reasonable decisions, at least in your mind, and the results show up later, combined, compressed, and impossible to untangle. So when something finally goes wrong, you're left asking, what is that thing that I am dealing with? What happened with the bees? Or the thing didn't matter on its own, but mattered because it was stacked on top of something else I didn't notice at the time. That uncertainty is what most beekeepers are struggling against, not bees. Most people think beekeeping is hard because of varroa mites, or weather, or nutrition, or yellow-legged hornets, or hive beetles, you name it. The list literally goes on. It's not just beekeeping anymore. But those aren't the problems on their own individually. They're each a pressure that can stack on top of the next. And one pressure doesn't break a colony all at once. It's multiple unseen pressures accumulating that do. A little stress from one direction, a little delay from another, a mismatch in between what the bees need and what the season will allow with timing. Even a hive inspection, as well intended and responsible as it may seem, has its own type of pressure added to the colony. It may be that nothing even looks wrong. Nothing demands any action until suddenly everything does. You go in one day, you do an inspection, and you just ask yourself, where did this come from? How did this happen? And that's what makes beekeeping so disorienting. Now, beekeeping itself isn't testing you, seeing if you know enough, if you've read enough, watched enough. It is testing you to see if you can recognize the pressures before they accumulate into too late. Most advice these days trains beekeepers how to identify symptoms that you see during an inspection. Spotty brood patterns, low population, poor food stores, but those are late signals, symptoms of pressures that we missed earlier. By the time that you can point to these pressures, the colony has already become under enough pressure and it's been there for weeks or perhaps even months. Real beekeeping happens before that, in the quiet space where nothing is obviously wrong, but things are no longer stable. That's hard because it means acting without certainty and sometimes not acting even when every instinct inside of you says, I've got to do something. This is where experienced beekeepers distinguish from overwhelmed ones. They stop chasing individual problems and start reading signals. Not just what they see, but what's changing, what's accelerating, and what's stacking on top of another pressure. This is what I call signal-based beekeeping. Observing what is changing instead of reading symptoms. And this is for the purpose of anticipating the trajectory of the colony based on the context of the circumstances. Right now, beekeeping does not look at signals. It looks and reacts to symptoms. Beekeepers that look for signals don't ask, what should I fix? They ask, what pressure is building here right now so that I can intervene in the most effective way as early as possible? Because no single stressor collapses a colony. Colonies fail when multiple pressures overlap at the wrong time and with no recovery window in between. Beekeeping gets hard when you're trained to react to events instead of trajectories. And this is why so many good beekeepers feel like they're always behind. They're reacting to what they can see, while the real problem is invisible. Pressure doesn't announce itself. It doesn't feel dramatic. It feels like ambiguity, actually. Kind of like second guessing yourself and wondering whether you should intervene or step back. And that discomfort you feel is not a flaw. It's the moment you outgrow checklist beekeeping. There isn't one single technique that makes beekeeping easy for us, but there is a shift that can make it more coherent. You stop trying to control the outcomes and start managing the pressures. You learn what stability looks like, how much disturbance one colony can truly absorb, in other words, how quickly they can bounce back from pressure, depending on what it is. And you learn when restraint is protective for your bees rather than passive. When you understand that, suddenly decisions feel a little bit lighter. The timing makes sense. And beekeeping stops feeling like a constant emergency. Not because the risks disappear, but because you finally understand what actually moves the needle in your favor and for your bees. Beekeeping isn't hard because you're bad at it. You're not bad at beekeeping. It's hard because you were never taught what to notice. And if you can't notice something in time, how can you respond in a timely manner for your bees? If beekeeping feels heavier than you expected that it would, that doesn't mean that you're failing. It means you're standing at the edge of a deeper way of understanding bees. One that's built on signals instead of symptoms, pressure instead of panic, understanding instead of constant action and disturbance. That's where real confidence comes from in beekeeping. My signal-based beekeeping book goes into a lot more detail about everything we've gone over today. I feel it's time to stop looking at symptoms, training beekeepers to observe symptoms, and therefore setting them up for a disaster-based hobby. It's not fun. Let's learn to recognize signals and pressure stacking and how to intervene before those pressures become too much for our colonies to bounce back from. Beekeeping can be better, and I think I can be better at beekeeping. I think we all can be better at beekeeping, because truly at heart, I know that's what each and every one of us wants. I'll see you guys in my next video.